This video is now in session, and here is another partisan opinion video. I'm going to talk about why Republicans are moving in the wrong direction. If you've been living under a rock, here is some context as to how the Republican Party has changed over the past 4 years. With Donald Trump's presidency, or with Donald Trump being inaugurated president, he has shifted the Republican Party more and more conservative. And after he lost in 2020, becoming a one-term president because of Joe Biden, a lot of Republicans stuck with Trump and his message that Joe Biden stole the election from Donald Trump. And from there, they started inviting over more obscure, I guess, policies and different kinds of conspiracy theories into their party. If you know Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was recently on the news very heavily for her for all the things she said before she was elected from Georgia. And right now, a lot of these people are following Donald Trump. A lot of Republican representatives and senators are following Donald Trump, and that sounds counterintuitive because Donald Trump lost the presidency. He's a one-term president, and I think many of the Republican congressmen, women, and people know that. They know that Trump lost fairly. And they know that they shouldn't be sticking on to Trump. But what Trump has that other people do not have, other politicians don't have, is the ability to control, or at least to control millions of supporters, millions upon millions, even after his presidency. I don't think any other I don't think any other president has been able to do that besides Barack Obama. But I mean, in terms of the Republican Party, not since Richard Nixon has there been so much support for a party's candidate, even if that candidate lost. So as a result, we have the Republicans are going through a divide, whether to become more of a moderate party or if they should become more conservative. And we have past precedent for this. Let's go back to Ronald Reagan. This is the 1980 blowout election that Reagan had against Jimmy Carter, who was president at that time. As a result, he made Jimmy Carter a one-term president. He won 489 electoral votes and strengthened on that in the 1984 election. But in 1988, George H.W. Bush, who is Reagan's vice president, decides to run as essentially a third term, but he runs as a more moderate kind of candidate, saying that he wouldn't increase taxes, but at the same time, he would not do the supply-side economics that Reagan promoted in his presidency. So he did really good in the first time, his first presidential election bid, but in his re-election bid, he did pretty horribly against Bill Clinton. And from here, Republicans had a decision to make, whether to stay moderate with the George H.W. Bush policies or to become more conservative like Ronald Reagan's policies. And the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party wanted to become more conservative, to become more like Ronald Reagan. So as a result, future Republican presidents have been more and more conservative. This starts off with George W. Bush, who's more conservative than his father, and that builds on with Donald Trump. And this built on even before George H.W. Bush. It started from Eisenhower, it went to Reagan, and then George W. Bush. It also went with Gerald Ford, and with each Republican president, the conservative score rises. So that's how the Republican Party has been, and it kind of worked for them in the 2000 election, but it only helped them in the short term. In the long term, it seeked to actually create more divisions in the Republican Party and make the Republican Party more fractured. So we see that culminated in 2020 and 2021, where Donald Trump lost his presidency because of how conservative he was and how or his demeanor, and at the same time you have a lot of very far right conservatives storming into the Capitol. So from the congressional leaders, Republican congressional leaders, and Republican congressmen and women had a decision to make, which was whether to stay with Trump's policies or revert back to the moderate policies of George H.W. Bush. And at first glance, I thought that they would revert more towards the George H.W. Bush policies because they know better. They definitely know better. Like, I'm pretty sure they know that a lot of the conspiracy thoughts are fake, and that politically it's not good for the Republican Party in the long term. But apparently I shouldn't have been surprised that they stuck with Trumpism. Now, obviously, it hasn't been cemented that they're sticking with Trumpism, but at this point, they really have. With when you have people like Kevin McCarthy visiting Trump, trying to make amends with him, when you have Matt Gaetz going over to Wyoming to try to primary Liz Cheney just because she impeached Donald Trump, just because you have Doug Ducey who did not succumb to the election fraud lies in Arizona. When you have Brad Raffensperger, when you have all of these people who are trying to be not even moderate Republicans, but Republicans who follow the institution, then Republicans are definitely going in the wrong direction. In 2022, they're definitely going to be able to win, but that's not because that's not going to be because of their very conservative policies. It's because, or it's not going to be because they're going to move towards Trumpism. It's because of the midterm punishment that is usually given to whoever is the party's incumbent in the White House, or whoever's party is in the White House. So in that case, it's the Democrats. So they're expected to lose the House of Representatives. And much of this is because of gerrymandering that will happen in the 2020 redistricting cycle. And the reason why that happened was Trump was on the ballot in 2020. So Republicans did win pretty big in a lot of races that don't pertain to the presidential race. But at the same time, they should not still be sticking with Donald Trump in the long run, because it's only going to hurt them. You have a lot of minorities, and if we look at the more important voter groups that will be occurring in the next few presidential elections, there are two groups that stand out: the Latino population and suburbanites. So suburbanites, we've already seen how they have voted more towards Democrats in the past 8 years, and that's almost definitely because of Trump, and that's pretty much one of myriad of reasons as to why Donald Trump lost his re-election bid. It was because of these suburban counties in places like Georgia, where you have Gwinnett County, where you have Gwinnett County here and Cobb County here. It's when you have Philadelphia counties like Delaware or Chester, Montgomery, or Bucks County. It's when you have the suburban area of Maricopa County. So, all of them went against Donald Trump. So Republicans should not be going towards Donald Trump, not at all, because they need those suburban voters. And obviously, what they're going to do now is it's just not going to be good for them in the next several years. The other thing to also note for is Latino voters. Latino voters did vote for Trump by larger amounts than before, but a lot of it was just unique to the situation. In the future, I expect a lot of these Latino populations to move back to the Democrats in 2024, especially in Texas along the Rio Grande Valley, because in 2020 they were choosing, if I were to simplify it very a lot, then they were essentially choosing between two very old white candidates, white men. So they just chose for whoever looked more aggressive, and that was Donald Trump to them. But in 2024, I expect the voting population, the Latino voting population, to move back towards Democrats, because what Donald Trump did was that he said that if Democrats would win, if Joe Biden would win in 2020, then socialist policies would immediately be enacted. And that's why a lot of Latino voters in places like Florida voted for Donald Trump. It's because they didn't want socialist policies, especially where they came from, like Cuba or Venezuela. But obviously, Joe Biden's not going to be able to do that. Even if he had a 55 Senate majority, he still would not be able to have socialist policies. And he doesn't even want socialist policies. So come 2024, I expect all of these people to go back to Joe Biden or whoever the Democratic candidate is going to be, just because Donald Trump was wrong about calling Biden a socialist. So you have these two very important voting groups who are trending more towards Democrats overall. And what Republicans are doing is they're doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They should be appealing to both voter groups, because both will be important in the next presidential election and future presidential elections to come. But instead, what they are doing is they are sticking with ultra conservatives in rural America, who are becoming less and less of a key population in the United States, and they're sticking with them in places like Wyoming. But that's just not going to result well. That's not going to be a good result for them. And if this keeps happening, where you have the Republican Party becoming more and more conservative and more bombastic or crazy in terms of what they say, even if it's to go directly against the status quo of political correctness, then you'll see more and more people voting for the Democratic Party or potentially voting for an independent party. We see a lot of Republicans defecting towards the Democratic Party because of how conservative the Republican Party has gotten over these past few decades. So that's all I have to say for this video, and I will see you in the next one. This video is now adjourned.